I never thought I would ever set foot in a prison. In fact, if anybody had asked me to volunteer or teach in prison, I would have said no. I was just too scared. I really believed all the stereotypes about what men and women in prison were like, that they were tough, mean, violent people. And on top of that, I was shy and terrified of speaking in front of large groups. So how is it that I'm here today to tell you what I've learned leading large-scale workshops to thousands of men and women in prison over the last 13 years? Well, in spite of all the fear, I listened to a small voice in my heart that said, "Say yes." And answering that call helped me step free of an inner prison of my own making. So today, I'm going to give you a peek into this world that I've come to know and share with you some of my own experiences along with recent research that are teaching us how we can transform prison from the inside. So when I started out, I knew very little about prisons. In this past year, we've had an amazing amount of media attention on this topic. President Obama and Pope Francis both visited U.S. prisons this past year, and they said we need to give people second chances. Bipartisan lawmakers across the country are saying that our current prison system is not working, and we need to find a new model. 95% of prisoners are going to be released at some point in time. So given that we want safer communities, doesn't it make sense to teach people in prison to become peaceful? So when we started 13 years ago, we began working with lifers in the largest maximum security women's prison in the world. Our initial team consisted of myself and my husband as co-leaders and 25 volunteers. So as you can imagine, when I started out, I was terrified. But after we spent 2 days with those women in prison, it turned my ideas upside down about what prisoners were like. Their gratitude touched me deeply, and that kept me coming back over the years. So we've grown, and now we offer large-scale workshops in prison gymnasiums to 200 plus inmates, and including 80 volunteers. And we have waiting lists on both sides. So people ask us all the time, what do you do there? Well, just imagine that you got angry because somebody pushed one of your buttons. Maybe it's your spouse or your child or your boss, whoever. And rather than yelling at them or shutting down, you were able to look inside yourself and dismantle your own inner anger button and respond in a wise and peaceful way. Well, that is true inner freedom, and that is the foundation of what we teach. So part of what's unique about our work is our volunteers work with the inmates in small groups, and they demonstrate the skills that we're teaching. They courageously reveal their own personal life challenges and feelings. And then they switch roles and they listen to the inmates respectfully and non-judgmentally. And that gives men and women in prison the free space to express their pain, their regret, and many say that it's the first time in their lives that they truly feel heard. And that deep mutual sharing breaks down this illusion that people are different, and it allows all of us from all walks of life to connect as humans. One of our volunteers who comes back again and again, she does that because to her, this is part of the recipe for world peace. At our first men's prison workshop, one of the male inmates stood up and he said to our group, "You people are like dinosaurs." I didn't know what he meant. And I thought, does he mean we're old-fashioned and irrelevant? Are we not aging so gracefully? Well, he went on to say, I've heard about people like you, and I've read about people like you, just like I've heard and read about dinosaurs. But I never believed that people like you existed, so genuine and caring. So we hear comments like that a lot. Why is that? Well, traditional US prisons, they create a shaming culture. So you may well say, well, don't we want them to feel ashamed of themselves? Isn't that a good thing? Recent research shows that high levels of shame for many people backfire and trigger violence and reoffense. So researchers define shame as judgments against oneself. I am defective. I feel worthless. What does help people is if they have remorse about what they've done. So part of the key seems to be helping people clearly distinguish between who they are and what they've done, and help them discover that inside they are good people who've made mistakes and can learn to do better in the future. So another piece of the research puzzle is, well, remember I told you that the volunteers, they demonstrate the skills that we're teaching. So recent research on the mirror neuron system is showing us a mechanism by which humans learn through imitation and modeling. So you might notice this in your children, that they imitate you. So even if you tell them the right thing to say, if they hear you swearing, they'll copy you. And it's such a great demonstration of how actions speak louder than words. And as humans, we model not only actions, but emotions and intentions as well. So this has tremendous implications for how we design prison cultures. Imagine if every day somebody told you over and over again that you were a bad person, and the only place that you could find acceptance and belonging was among hardened criminals. That would be a great way to train better criminals, wouldn't it? So if we want better outcomes, we really need to address the entire prison culture. Now, there are a few countries in the world that are doing this, experimenting with respectful rather than shaming prison cultures, and their recidivism rates are much lower than ours here in the United States. So, yes, it's going to take time for our prison cultures to shift. But I have been so inspired by the potential that I've seen. At the women's prison, we started with just 2 workshops a year. But the women were so hungry for change that we heard from the warden that they saw a noticeable shift in the inmate culture towards peace. Now that stunned me. As an educator, I am so excited about the untapped potential I've seen for change from the inside. And recently, we got results on our own program outcomes. Now, these are preliminary, but I know the stories and the people behind these numbers, and what's happening here deserves more research. So, where do we go from here? Well, we know that our current prison model is not working. So let's consider this. I know a woman who was a lifer. She was told by the judge that she would likely die in prison. She regularly attended our workshops, and at the age of 45, she earned her freedom. Now let's say that she lives an average life expectancy, which is 86. So by educating her in this way, we have saved the taxpayers over $2 million in prison costs alone. She has learned the emotional intelligence skills to not only get her job, but to keep it. She reunited with her family, and now her grandson knows his loving grandma. And that is just one example out of many. What we're seeing is that if we can just help men and women reduce their shame in prison and find the inner freedom to make responsible choices, it's creating this giant impact in our world. That is what's possible when we transform prison from the inside. Thank you.